What would you do if an elderly man's cries stopped you in your tracks? When 23-year-old aspiring nurse Ava sees an elderly stranger kicked out of the grocery store, she faces a choice: ignore the man's suffering or reach out. With so much hardship already as a struggling single mom, will offering compassion here unlock blessings, danger, or a shocking truth? Now witness the electric first contact between two lonely souls. Neither aware their selfless actions will set off a chain of events altering both their destinies forever. Because sometimes we are exactly where we need to be to change everything. Restoring faith that we are all connected, especially in humanity's darkest places. Ava sighed as she walked down the cereal aisle, rubbing her temples to try and ease the throbbing ache behind her eyes. It had been another grueling double shift at the diner today, and she was absolutely exhausted. But she still had to grab some groceries for the week ahead before she could finally head home and collapse into bed. At just 23 years old, Ava found herself solely responsible for raising her 5-year-old niece, Lucy. Ava had not pictured herself becoming a surrogate mother at only 23 years old. She was an independent spirit who moved straight out of her parents' house after high school, eager to start nursing school and life on her own terms. Ava's relationship with her parents growing up had been strained at times. Her mother battled anxiety and depression, often becoming withdrawn and unavailable for days on end. As the oldest child, Ava developed a fierce independence and aversion to relying on others from having to pick up the pieces when her mother couldn't cope. While Ava was a devoted, loving aunt to Lucy, the sudden pressure of motherhood triggered her deep-rooted fears of failing those who needed her. She worried history would repeat itself if she couldn't provide Lucy the stable childhood she never had. After Lucy's parents died in a terrible car accident 6 months ago, Ava stepped up right away to take custody of Lucy. She dropped out of nursing school so she could devote all of her time and energy to caring for her sweet niece. Now Ava worked long hours waitressing at a local diner just to make ends meet each week. Between her wages and the small checks from social services for Lucy's care, they barely scraped by. Ava stifled a yawn and blinked hard, trying to focus under the harsh fluorescent lights of the grocery store. She was reaching for a box of Lucy's favorite cereal when shouting erupted from the next aisle over. Ava's focus sharply shifted toward the sudden commotion. A cascade of questions flooded her mind. What stirred this unexpected turmoil, and would Ava find herself drawn into an unforeseen twist of events? "You think you can steal from me, you worthless thief?" the store manager bellowed angrily. "Get out! Get out right now!" Ava peered around the corner of the aisle to see what was happening. The manager had grabbed onto the collar of an elderly man, shoving him violently towards the exit. The old man clutched a loaf of bread in his trembling hands, weakly protesting that he had not tried to steal anything. But the manager refused to listen, roughly manhandling the frail gentleman as he forced him toward the door. "I won't have your kind coming in here and stealing from me," the manager spat viciously. "Now get out and don't come back." With one final push, the manager shoved the old man out onto the sidewalk and slammed the door behind him. The gentleman stood there looking dazed and bewildered about what had just transpired. Ava's heart ached for the old man. That could have easily been her grandfather if he was still alive. She hurried to the front of the store, where the gentleman hovered outside the entrance, clearly unsure what to do next. "Sir, are you okay?" Ava asked gently as she approached him. The old man gave a slight nod but remained silent. Up close, Ava noticed his unwashed, worn-out clothes and the hungry, desperate look in his eyes. She knew that expression all too well from her own impoverished childhood. It was the face of someone who had no one to turn to, nowhere left to go. On impulse, Ava made a split-second decision and said, "Wait right here, sir. I'll be back in just a minute." What could she possibly be about to do? And how would it unravel the seconds that followed? Suspense gripped the air as speculation swirled. Was she headed to confront the manager, or was a different revelation on the horizon? Ava's gaze narrowed with sudden resolve. She rushed back into the grocery store with purpose. Lingering shoppers peered at her curiously as she began snatching items seemingly at random. in addition to the few basic items she had already picked out for herself and Lucy. She began grabbing more food: bread, peanut butter, granola bars, canned soup, and vegetables. She even picked up some apples, cheese sticks, and milk. Ava brought everything up to the register, emptying out nearly her entire wallet to pay for the huge haul of groceries. She knew it would make the next week extra tight, but she pushed those thoughts aside as she hurried to wheel the bags of food outside. The old man was still there waiting, his eyes widening as Ava began loading all the grocery bags into his cart. "Here you go, sir. Please take these," she said, placing the last bag into his trembling hands. "Bless you, Angel. You've saved my life today," the old man rasped, looking down at the bags of groceries in disbelief. "I'm just glad I could help a little." "You take care, sir," Ava replied modestly. The man stared at her for a moment before asking, "What is your name, young lady?" "I'm Ava," she replied with a smile. "It's very nice to meet you, Ava. I'm Samuel," he said, extending a trembling hand. Ava gently shook it in greeting. "Do you live nearby, Ava?" Samuel inquired. "Yes, just a few blocks away on Oak Street," she informed him. Samuel nodded slowly. "And what does a kind-hearted soul like yourself do?" "Well, I'm an aspiring nurse, actually," Ava explained. "I had to drop out of nursing school recently due to some family circumstances, but I hope to finish my degree someday. I just want to help care for people, make their lives a little easier, you know?" Samuel smiled warmly. "What a noble profession. I'm sure you'll make a wonderful nurse, Ava." "Thank you. That's very kind of you to say," Ava replied, touched by his confidence in her. "Well, Ava, the aspiring nurse, the world could use more compassionate people like you," Samuel said sincerely. "I cannot thank you enough for what you've done today. Making sure you have food is thanks enough for me," Ava responded. "But I do hope our paths cross again. Take good care of yourself, Samuel." With that, she turned and headed towards her car, heart feeling lighter than it had in ages. It had taken so little effort to brighten this man's entire day. Her one small act of kindness had eased a complete stranger's suffering, even if just for a moment. For now, that was enough. Over the next few days, Ava found it difficult to stop thinking about her interaction with the old man at the grocery store. Had her spur-of-the-moment act of generosity really made any sort of lasting difference in his life? She wished so badly that she could do more to help people like him, the forgotten ones, whose society had cast aside through no fault of their own. About a week later, Ava's phone rang, and what came next was going to change her life. But was it going to be something good or something bad? The answer waited on the other end of the call. When she answered, a friendly male voice on the other end politely asked, "Is this Ava speaking?" "Yes, this is Ava," she replied curiously. "Wonderful. This is Dr. Miles Barton calling. I wanted to thank you for your kindness in helping my father Samuel last week at the grocery store." Dr. Barton shared how his father Samuel had ended up in that situation. Samuel had been visiting Dr. Barton in town for the week. He decided to walk to the nearby store one day while his son was at work. On the way, Samuel was caught in a sudden downpour. By the time he arrived at the store, his clothes were drenched and dirty from the mud. In his rush to get inside, he accidentally dropped and stained the jacket he was carrying. Between his disheveled, rain-soaked appearance and old, worn clothes, he looked homeless. The skeptical manager assumed Samuel was trying to steal when he picked up the bread. No matter how much Samuel tried to explain it was an innocent misunderstanding, the manager refused to listen. He only saw what appeared to be a filthy, potentially dangerous vagrant. After being shoved outside, Samuel was too distraught to even remember his son's phone number. He felt hopeless standing there with nowhere to go. But then Ava came along and treated him with such genuine kindness and dignity. Her compassion meant the world after the cruelty he had just endured. Once Samuel shared all this, it made perfect sense to Ava why he seemed destitute. She felt even more heartbroken hearing how terribly he'd been judged based solely on appearance. Her small act of decency gave back a bit of his lost faith in humanity. And Samuel was clearly grateful beyond words to Ava for looking beyond surface assumptions and seeing his humanity. Ava was caught off guard momentarily, but soon smiled as the pieces clicked into place. "Oh yes, of course. It was my sincere pleasure to help your father. I'm just glad to hear he's doing all right." Dr. Barton went on to explain how touched he was by what Ava had done. After the grocery store incident, Samuel had told his son all about the generous young woman who helped a complete stranger in need without a second thought. He made sure to share Ava's name and the general area where she said she lived. Dr. Barton was well connected at local hospitals and clinics. He asked around until he found a nurse who recognized Ava's name as a former nursing student. From there, he was able to get Ava's phone number and call her directly to express his family's immense gratitude. Ava was incredibly moved that her simple act of compassion resonated so deeply with Samuel that he shared her story with his son. And clearly, Dr. Barton was equally as touched by her kindness, if he had gone to such great lengths just to track her down and thank her personally. Ava was wrapping up the conversation when Dr. Barton dropped a bombshell that left her utterly stunned. The shock was so strong that she couldn't find words to respond. Dr. Barton revealed that he was one of the most prominent orthopedic surgeons in their area of the state. When he learned that Ava had dropped out of nursing school to take care of her niece, he made her an astonishing, life-changing offer. He wanted to fully pay for Ava to return to school and finish her nursing degree so that she could have a better life for herself and Lucy. What will she say next? Will she accept his offer? Tears immediately sprang to Ava's eyes. She was absolutely floored by this unbelievable generosity being extended by a total stranger. Of course, she desperately wanted to complete her degree. It would provide her with the skills and qualifications to properly care for Lucy now, while also opening up doors for their future. But how could she possibly accept such an extravagant gift? Sensing her hesitation, Dr. Barton said earnestly, "Please, allow me to do this small thing for you, Ava. You helped my father when he had absolutely nowhere else to turn. I want to offer you that same kindness in return. I'm in a position to change your life for the better, so please, let me." After several more minutes of tearful conversation, Ava finally accepted Dr. Barton's astonishing offer. Overwhelmed with gratitude and shock that her single small act of decency could possibly warrant such a grand reward. Over the next few years, Ava absolutely thrived in nursing school, thanks to Dr. Barton's generous financial support. She was able to cut down her hours waitressing and truly focus on her studies for the first time. She also got to spend more quality time with little Lucy each week, which her heart swelled with happiness over. On the day of her nursing school graduation, Dr. Barton sat in the audience cheering loudly alongside his equally delighted father, Samuel. By simply following her heart one day in a grocery store, Ava had opened the door to finding her way onto a brighter path for the future. In the decade following her graduation, Ava flourished in her nursing career, eventually becoming the head nurse of the cardiac care unit at the city's top hospital. She absolutely loved the opportunity to uplift and care for others through the power of medicine and treatment, just as Dr. Barton had uplifted her. He had helped her find her true calling in life, and words could not express how grateful she was. One evening, an inexplicable force seized Ava, plunging her into a situation that mirrored her worst nightmare, a twist of fate that would test her resilience and redefine the course of her life. The paramedics rushed into the emergency room with a gentleman who had collapsed while dining at a local restaurant. To Ava's utter shock, it turned out to be Dr. Barton himself. He had suffered a massive heart attack. As Dr. Barton clutches his chest in the grip of a heart attack, Ava faces a pivotal choice. Can she be the hero he desperately needs in this intense and critical moment? Ava immediately rushed to join the emergency cardiology team as they began working to try and save Dr. Barton's life. As they did CPR and administered emergency medication, memories of all Dr. Barton had done for Ava's family flooded her mind. She remembered the total shock and joy of him calling to offer to fund her education. She pictured him grinning proudly on her graduation day as she collected her nursing degree. She thought about the way he had mentored and encouraged her over the many years since. As tears streamed down Ava's face, a sense of impending loss grips her heart. In the midst of despair, she grapples with the fear that Dr. Barton might slip away. Can she find a way to save not only his life, but also their connection before it's too late? After an excruciating 3 hours of touch-and-go emergency treatment, the team finally managed to stabilize Dr. Barton's condition. Ava stayed right by his side that entire night, monitoring him vigilantly until he awoke late the next morning. As soon as his eyes fluttered open, Ava grasped his hand in both of hers. "Good morning, Dr. Barton," she said softly. "Don't try to speak just yet. You're in the hospital, but you're going to be okay. We're taking good care of you." He gave her hand a weak squeeze and nodded slightly, relief washing over his face that he had pulled through. A faint smile crossed his lips. "My guardian angel, yet again," he whispered hoarsely. Ava just smiled back warmly, brushing away a few tears. She was so incredibly grateful he was still with them. Over the next several weeks of Dr. Barton's recovery, Ava came to visit him every day on her breaks at the hospital. They talked and laughed together as she helped him slowly rebuild his strength through physical therapy exercises. Their daily visits were soon the highlight of both of their days. Through this shared trauma, Ava felt like she had truly come to know Dr. Barton, not just as a mentor, but as the caring father figure she never had. Finally, the big day arrived, when Dr. Barton was medically cleared to be discharged from the hospital. As Ava helped gather his belongings, she was surprised when he took her hands, his expression suddenly serious. In a moment that etches itself into Ava's heart, Dr. Barton utters words so profound that they resonate with the promise of a gratitude that will forever echo in Ava's soul. What could Dr. Barton possibly say that would leave Ava eternally grateful? "Ava, you've always been like a daughter to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Ever since we met that day when you helped my father, I've considered you part of my family." Dr. Barton paused, drawing in a breath, his eyes gleaming with warmth. "Last night, my father Samuel and I had a heart-to-heart. We'd be absolutely thrilled if you and Lucy could move into a mansion nearby our estate. Good news is it's usually rented out, but the recent tenants have moved out, and it's currently vacant. So we'd like to offer it to you rent-free. This way, Lucy gets a wonderful home, and we get to be more than just neighbors. We become a real family, looking out for each other." Unable to form words, Ava just wrapped Dr. Barton in a huge, warm embrace. He held her tightly, and in that moment, they both knew her answer was an exhilarated, wholehearted yes. Many joyful years later, Ava paused in the kitchen doorway and smiled at the scene before her. Little Lucy, now 16, was playing baseball in the backyard with 86-year-old Samuel, laughing together as they tried to hit makeshift balls with broomsticks. Dr. Barton relaxed nearby in a lounge chair, clapping and calling out encouragement. Blinking back happy tears, Ava marveled at how one day offering a bit of food and decency to a desperate stranger had echoed through the years since. That single act of compassion had linked their destinies, revealing the boundless power of humanity's capacity for generosity and love when we open our hearts.